Yeah, I actually prepared a little music when the clock was running, but as always, technology, one day I probably will figure it out and everything will be super nice and then uh, and then everything goes smooth. But if this is the biggest thing in the world, it's not that bad at all. What do you think, right? So we count off those last 20 seconds, you know, I always think that a minute to wait for me going live is always a little bit long. Anyhow, keep talking already. While this clock is running and we are live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go. Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome at the place. If you don't know what this is about, we are here to be more and do more and, also give more connections and maybe more answers. It still says 12 o'clock here at US Central Time. But just because daylight saving time, I decided to, instead of adjusting to the US, I adjusted to the European time. So for 2 weeks, we will be at 1 p.m. Central Time, and then 7 o'clock Europe time. That stays as it is. What about that, right? Before we go further, don't forget to subscribe to my new YouTube channel. Quite a few people of you did that already, so thank you for that. Or follow me on Facebook Live. Some new things will be coming on real soon as well, so stay tuned with that. And we have prepared a new, I was just fighting with all the buttons here, a new, and it sounds super serious, and it is actually because I am a little bit in a serious mood lately. So asked my questions earlier this week. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to ask myself, should I keep faith in humanity with everything that's going on? And I'm sure some of you people do that as well. And one of the people that I talked to this week said, "Oh, Sean, don't make it too serious." Well, sometimes you just have to be a serious person, right? After all, I wrote a very serious book, and in that book, we talk about the five life energies. We have a physical energy, we have a mental energy, we have creative energy, we have manifestation energy, and the divine energy. And specifically our mental energy is very much affected if you follow the news lately. And how can you not? And I'm not a big I'm not a big news junkie at all anymore, but since ever the war started in Ukraine and Russia, I can't stop not looking at I can't stop not watching the news. That's a double negative. That's always hard, and anyhow, so that's what I want to talk about a little bit. And I came across a couple of things that I kind of felt myself as well, right? I was reading up about things like, how do people actually, when war starts, how do people normally react? Because that's not a new normal thing, at least not in the Western world. There are, by the way, don't forget, there are more areas in the world where there is almost constant war, and then the country that I live in and actually also have a citizenship in actually is often involved in those wars as well. So it's not that this is a new world war in Russia and Ukraine, but it's a war since the Second World War in on European ground, so to speak. So I think that makes it a lot closer at home. The other thing is, as most of you people know, I'm a dancer, so I'm very much involved in the dance world, and there are just simply a lot of dancers from Russia and the Ukraine, and just if it's one little thing, and maybe it's trivial, that's hugely affected by it. But I did so many talks on this podcast or on this vlog, whatever you want to call it, the place that we should keep faith in humanity. We always need to believe in the good of people. And I must honestly say, I don't know about you guys, but I start to doubt a little bit if that's the really right mindset nowadays, right? And maybe it never was, right? I wrote a book, as you know, about abuse, and if you read through that story, and if I read my own things back, then I think like, wow, someone who's doing so evil to a little boy as I was then. I was 7 when that started, and then I did my research, of course, on abuse and discovered that, you know, every year we have about 200,000 new cases. Yeah, it's not that's no joke. 200,000 new cases of abuse. So you start to think about, should we actually keep believing in the fact that human beings are, good, and that there are just a few bad people that messes it up for the rest of the world. And so I have these bigger life questions when things like this happen, and I'm sure some of you do as well. So why not address them? And while I was reading up on this stuff, I came across a story about a Holocaust survivor. Now, I know there are people out there who don't even believe that the Holocaust happened, but trust me, the Holocaust did really happen. And one of the survivor, he probably already passed away. He said, "Well, of course, that I was taken, and this person was taken out of his school while he was teaching. He was literally picked up from a school while he was teaching by at that time the Nazis." And he said, strangely enough, I was not even so surprised about that the Nazis did that to me. What I was surprised is the reaction of the people around me. And this happened in Germany, but it could have happened in the Netherlands as well, or any of the other countries. Let's not pretend we're all much better than other people at that time. And he said, just I utterly lost my faith in humanity. And while he was in camp in during the Holocaust, and he was, one of the very few lucky ones who survived it, he came across people who had that same sentiment, that same feeling that they started to lose faith in humanity. If people, I mean, I cannot even imagine what it is to be in the Holocaust. So by no means I try to say that I went through the same thing. But we'll talk a little bit about what I went through. It's a while ago since I did that. He said, I lost really faith in humanity, which is completely understandable, I think. And there are other peoples, and actually, I wrote about it myself, that I actually found more faith in other things while going through the ordeals that I went through. And I must say they're a little bit shaky at the moment, and it's good. We don't always have to pretend that we are better than another person. Actually, we should never pretend that. But sometimes I have a tendency to think that I keep it all together and just do these shows and stuff like that. But I must say, in these days, besides the fact that I think what's going on in Ukraine and Russia is total outrageous, and there's a lot of weird talks around it too, which I also don't understand. But I did 2 episodes on the place, which was more concerned about the overall mental health of people in the world, because people start to develop more anxiety and fear. And should we address that, or should we think, wow, my problems are so small compared to the people in Ukraine and the refugees there, so maybe I should not pay attention to it? And I say, yes, pay attention to it now, because it will help no one if your anxiety and your fear, and through that maybe other mental issues start to develop. So I say, start to address that immediately. In the dance world, one of the famous dance teachers, Professor Dr. Ruud Vermeij, he actually offered his help for free to dancers, which I think that's amazing. And other people did that too. I did that too, by the way. So if you need some coaching through this time, then definitely I offer my services for free for everyone in the dance world who needs that. But that sounds a little bit commercial, but it's just how that was a little bit towards last week's show. Say, hey, are there things that you can do about this situation? Now, well, I am not the person who picks up a gun and fly through Kiev and start to fight there. Although I do have a gun because I live in Texas, but that's that's something else. I inherited whole different story. But I was reading up about that. What are these sentiments when war started and it doesn't immediately affect you and stuff like that. It's a crazy thing. There are a lot of stories about it, and of course, in World War II, there was not a lot of communication, so you didn't know what was going on. But now, with all the social media and people on TikTok, you actually also don't know really what's going on, because you have only a one-sided way of the news getting to us. Russia completely cut off Facebook so that we don't see the Russians protesting, and then everyone spins their own story. We have seen the craziness around Corona, so it can get only crazier. So, to some extent, or to a large extent, I must say, I really start to miss just really good journalism. I think it's great that we have social media, but man, what a crazy story comes out of those countries, both of them, by the way. Suddenly we need heroes, and it's great that an Olympic champion boxer is now going to fight in the war of the Ukraine. But think about a normal dad who picks up the guns. Is that not important? Why do we need to have these big people that are heroes in our life? Think about the normal people. So, lost in humanity is what that person in the Holocaust said as well. He said, what happened to it? I'm not talking about the soldiers who should have protected me, but what about the people? What about the people in the surroundings? What about the people in the school? My fellow teachers. Why didn't they stop those Nazis? And maybe they couldn't because I'm going to tie a couple of things together, by the way, today. Maybe they couldn't because, there was a lot of violence going on. And now I go back to a little time also during World War II. My dad, who unfortunately passed away last year, and I think in 2 months from now, it's a year ago. And he grew up in Indonesia. And Indonesia at the time was a Dutch colony. And of course, if you just don't know a lot about it, it's a very black and white way of thinking. Like, okay, Indonesia had to be free of the Netherlands, which I totally agree with. I mean, they were a colony at the time, but the war to liberate Indonesia from the Dutch colonials was very brutal, and there's not a lot of people who have interest in reading that. So I understand if you don't know all these details, but the so-called freedom fighters, they were very brutal and vicious. And if you read about that, that's very bad. One of the things that happened is my grandma. She was she was colonial, but she didn't live like a colonial. She lived among the Indonesians. But since she had a Dutch passport, and she looked like an Indonesian, by the way, if you see pictures from her, and she was snatched out of the village. And my dad, who was in military training at that time, always believed that the village people, never protected my grandma and siblings and other family members and from other families by taking to camps. So he started to get a really deep mistrust to people. And you could see that throughout his whole life that you can never trust someone. He actually tried to teach us, and us was mainly the boys, saying you start always with mistrusting people. You can always trust them later. And I always said that, that's such a negative way of looking at the world. I rather start with trusting the people, and if they disappoint me, then okay, that's fine. That's on their karma, and I have all this, you know, I don't know. I have all this talk about karma and stuff like that. And he said, "Well, son, you will find out soon enough that it's always better for you to mistrust people first, and then you can always trust them later." And I'm happy that I changed that to the most part in my life. But he said something that a psychologist, his name is Israel Charney, um, and he wrote a lot about war trauma and stuff like that. Said as well is, is it really healthy to truly believe in the goodness of people? Now, most of you people that know that I have a belief that is rooted in Christian belief. I went away from Catholic Church, but I still have my Christian belief, and that's coming from that. We need to believe in the good of people, right? But is that really the right way to go on like this if you see what's going on in the world, right? And I'm not saying that you should start mistrusting people, but I do agree that I sometimes have an utterly naive way of looking at the world. And maybe we all have. And therefore, we are so surprised that a group, no matter how small they are, it's definitely not one person, Let's not there be let there not be a mistake. Only Putin by himself could not do this either. That there are a group of people, and often it's a minority, can do so evil in the world that they put the whole world into something bad. As what's going on right now, and we don't know even where it stops. Right? Is that maybe a naive way of thinking? Because if you look at the past, I actually never found a time where that was not true. Where there are always people, whether it's politicians, whether criminals, whether there are maybe dictators like Mr. Putin, do things like this. And is that healthy for our mind to have that utter belief in the good of people? Yeah, that's the question that I ask myself. Now, I don't think that I have a cool answer for that because I don't. I really don't. You know, I do believe that if we start to build societies where we go and go with the fairness and the goodness of people, I always believe that that would be a much healthier way of, creating a community and a society than only having laws to punish people when they do something wrong. I always thought that was wrong, but I must say some of these fundamental beliefs are a little bit shaky at the moment. So I'm just wondering, out loud, I just use this broadcasting time to see if that is something we need to do. And then can we do something about it? That's another question you want to ask yourself, right? So, most of you, before I go into that, most of you know that I am always very busy and very passionate about trying to lower the numbers of abuse and, specifically sexual abuse. And there are 200,000 every year in Europe and the US together, which means every minute that I talk to you, there was a new victim of abuse. That, by the way, didn't stop with all the victims that are now coming out of the war. So if you talk about victims in general, with whatever it is, probably every second that we talk, there is a new victim somewhere in around the world. I don't think that we make a lot of progressions as human beings, right? So we should really think out loud, and maybe I don't know how to solve that, to be honest. But is it really true that we are actually heading in the right direction as a human race, right? Or are people just like maybe Mr. Putin? They don't care about these things. They just think about their power. And okay, he talks about, the safety of his country, and maybe that's all true. Let's be not super hypocritical here. I don't say he's doing the right thing, but there are definitely times when the US had exactly the same behavior. And I'm proud of the country that I'm in. Don't forget me wrong, but if I go back to time 1963, we were definitely willing to go to war with a country because rockets were about to be placed in an island called Cuba. Right? We did the same thing there. And the politicians at that time, that was John F. Kennedy, he had enough power so that Russia actually backed out. But if they didn't back out, I am for 100% sure that we would have gone to war at that time as well. We called that the Cuba crisis. There was way more things going on than we know that publicly know. But think about that. We wanted to do the same thing then as Russia was doing right now. Now, we didn't do all these things, so we cannot be blamed of all the atrocities that maybe would have taken place. But do think that politicians run this world and they are willing to send people to war over things that they believe in. And maybe that's a good thing because I live in the free world. I believe in what the US stand for most of the time. But I know that is just a perception of seeing the things, right? So I think we need to go away a little bit from really quickly thinking he's wrong and they are right. That's one thing, right? Now, when things go out of hand as far as it went with Hitler and the Nazis, where we had, destruction of whole people, it's maybe a little bit clearer who's right and wrong, right? But in this case, yes, of course, Mr. Putin is not right to do what he does, but don't think that he's alone. It's impossible to do a war like that by himself, right? There are enough people who believe in that he was right, and therefore we have a war at hand. But deep inside that is we are willing to kill to either defend or to attack whatever it is. We are definitely still, as human beings, willing to kill. The help that we can send is often what the US is doing. We don't want to be involved in the war, but we do send weapons so that you can kill, you yourself can kill the other people. You know, to be honest, I'm getting very lost there. I'm just getting very lost. And maybe human beings are not meant to be that peaceful, or maybe we are not created by the great God that I believe in. Otherwise, why are these things there? I mean, I don't have any answers there anymore. I'm getting super lost if I see pictures of kids that are just, murdered. Or I see, I still don't figure out, by the way, one of my friends is online, Hans. Maybe there's this black and white picture where there are a lot of people waiting for a train to flee out of Russia. It felt like an old picture or something like that. But can we really do nothing in the world? And then some people ask, what would you do? I don't know. If I was young enough, maybe I would have the stamina to go there and fight. I don't know. But if that's a good thing, maybe that's how human beings are. We always want to fight. I don't know. But anyhow, um, it seems that peace for the whole world seems far away. According to Christian belief, by the way, it will never happen, which is a weird belief if you think about it in itself, but we strive for it anyhow. And so I'm a lot, there's a lot of rambling going on in my head today, as you can notice, but I tie the two things together. I lived my life in fear because I was abused, and I definitely did not trust anyone around me, and specifically not men. I had a really deep mistrust in men because they were able to do really violent things for me on a very personal level, but it seems that they can do it also as a group on a less personal level, if you want to call it, by causing a war. And the psychologist is not saying, his name is Israel Charney, if you want to look him up, he is not saying that we should lose our faith in humanity, but we should be a little bit more careful if it comes to mental health with an utterly naive approach that we can solve all the problems in the world, because deep inside all human beings are are good people. And to be honest, I'm putting a little big question mark behind that team. Now, luckily, I promise to keep it also a little bit light. I am surrounded with a lot of nice and good people that I can trust and do trust. Um, but since we believe in all the goodness of the people, a lot of people around us have a really hard time when something bad happens to us to really come into action and help other people. We can hardly believe what's going on. So maybe we do it by sending money or maybe sending stuff, but it's really hard to help some people. Um, to throw this in the open, because like I said, I bring everything together what's going on in my life. I had a pretty hard period after my dad passed away, and some of my past memories. If you read my book, you know that you know the upbringing with my dad was not always the easiest one. I think he did love us a lot, but it was, let's say, not the easiest one. Let's put it that way, right? And in that time, I started to develop times where I had a lot of difficulties with my own mental health, which is strange as a human, as a coach, as a mental coach. And in the beginning, I had a lot of shame for it, so I didn't want to say it to anyone. But anyhow, I start to come out of it also on the place. But to my utterly surprise, it is the people that I would think of that would come to the rescue and help me, they were not there. And in the beginning, I was really angry at them. But then I said, well, maybe they don't know how to help someone in that problem. And then other people who I actually did not expect it from, they offered good help and guidance and just support. But that's maybe because they knew how to deal with it. Does that make any sense? So we have not trained ourselves to deal with situations worldwide as bad as there's going on. And strangely enough, that's the question that this professor asked, why are we not prepared? It's not, are we really surprised that these big things are going on in the world? But every time we are surprised and we need to, get together how to offer help and support. Does that make sense? So he knows that, and so do I. We cannot stop Putin as normal people, but maybe there's a lot more that we can do than just this emotional reaction that we have, and also give a lot of much support to the people around it if it comes to mental help. And the reason why I say that, and I started this series long time ago, because the number of anxiety and depressions will be so out of the roof, through the roof, in a couple of years. It will be definitely the number one disease in the world predicted in the next coming 10 years. Now, COVID, the war in Russia, Ukraine, I don't think it really helps to do that. And this professor makes a little bit of a case like maybe that is because we always think that these things won't happen again. Like, people in Europe, we will never have war in Europe again. Well, that is hugely mistaken, and therefore maybe we are less prepared. So, anyhow, that was my talk for today. I don't give a lot of answers today. Normally, I offer also a lot of, 10 steps you do this and 5 steps you do that. Not today. Today, I'm just only sharing what I believe is shaking up my world internally, mostly in my head. Yeah, I'm doubting a little bit the faith that I have. I definitely doubting the faith in humanity, struggling with that too. Because if you lose the ground under your feet, then that's not a good thing. And one of the things that I have this medium to throw it out there. So if you want to share your thoughts with me, go ahead. By the way, if you want to do more than just sharing your thoughts with me, you can always jump with me on a Zoom. On Zoom, we always have some people waiting in the Zoom room. That's not a real word, but I just made it up. Um, where we talk about these things a little bit more. It's not always this serious, to be honest. We have light talks as well. I just wanted to throw out the bigger things that were going on in this world. So I hope you like that too, that it is not always like I have all the answers, ask me anything you want, because I don't. That would also be super crazy. But next week I'm back, I hope, with a little bit lighter topic than I had today. Um, what time is it? Yeah, I did about the half hour. If you want me to answer or go a little bit deeper in the topic, then always send me a message and I will definitely look into that. And this was Jean from The Place, right? From The Place. This was Jean from The Place. See, that's how you do that. And you have to practice it a little bit to do that. I hope to see you back next time. If you are waiting for me in the Zoom, don't hang up. But for the people who were online on Facebook and on YouTube and what have you not, don't forget to subscribe and follow. And I'll see you back next week. Bye bye.